So at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Casey so we can actually discuss, is emotional intelligence something that can, in fact, be learned? Casey, it's all yours.
Thanks, David. We all know people who seem to be naturally gifted in how well they work with others. They understand how to put people at ease, and if they're leaders, how to motivate their people and keep them actively engaged in their work. The truth is that some people will be more naturally gifted than others, but the good news is that EQ skills can be learned. There's been some clear research on this, and our own research here at TRACOM has shown good evidence that people can learn how to interact more effectively at work. But in order for this to happen, people have to be personally motivated, and they need to practice what they learn back on the job and get good reinforcement for their new skills. Johnson & Johnson was among the first companies to test the link between emotional intelligence and business performance. They had more than 1,400 employees take part in a comparison of high performers and average performers, and they found a strong relationship between superior performing leaders and emotional competence. Further, they found that emotional intelligence, just like technical skill, can be developed through a systematic and consistent approach to training and development. Just quickly, a couple of other researchers. Fabio Sala of the Hay Group conducted research finding that workshop interventions are effective at improving EQ, and other research at Case Western University found that training in EQ improved performance significantly and that those gains can be retained even over many years. Here at TRACOM, we use a model that's similar to emotional intelligence called versatility. Our research has shown that people with high versatility are rated as more effective across a variety of performance measures, including leadership ability and promotability. And just recently, researchers at Colorado State University found that our versatility measure is highly related to two different measures of emotional intelligence. So in summary, there is a genetic disposition to EQ, but research clearly shows that it can be learned. There's certainly a need for practice and reinforcement to build these skills. And finally, EQ skills won't be improved without a sincere motivation and desire to do so. We've learned through this research and our own work in building individual and organizational performance that there's a connection between emotional intelligence and behavioral style. What's really key here is that EQ is influenced by people's natural behavioral styles in a couple of ways. One is the unique ways that they display emotional intelligence. People who have different styles don't show things like optimism or adaptability in the same ways. There's some very important behavioral differences at work here. The second issue is that people with different styles also interpret and respond to the EQ behavior of others in different but predictable ways. Emotional intelligence applies across many situations for all people. So you can think of examples of this. It's important for salespeople. It's important for individual contributors. It's important for customer-facing employees, all sorts of people. For the purposes of this webinar and to give examples that all of us can relate to, we're going to focus on the behavior of leaders specifically. So you all probably have witnessed leaders in your lifetimes who have a high degree of emotional intelligence. And this is true for most leaders. Most really effective leaders are distinguished by a high degree of EQ. And different situations call for different leadership techniques. A leader who has IQ is able to adapt his or her technique to different situations and employ different leadership styles. Without emotional intelligence, a person, even a very smart person with high intelligence, great experience, and good ideas, won't be as effective of a leader as they can be if they have a high EQ. And what research has found is that the higher that a leader advances, the more emotional intelligence is important. So let's go ahead and give some examples of what emotional intelligence looks like and how it's impacted by behavioral style, in particular for leaders in organizations. I want to point out that we're focusing on the emotional intelligence model of Daniel Goleman and his colleagues just because it's one of the most well-known and used EQ models in organizations today, and because of this, much of the work and research on EQ centers around this model. Some of you may be familiar with this model, but I want to discuss it so that everyone is clear on exactly what we mean by emotional intelligence. Specifically, I'll give some examples of how people's natural behavioral styles influence both how they display emotional intelligence and how other people might interpret those behaviors.